How do you envision fulfilling your role as chief pastor to the clergy of this diocese? What would that pastoral support look like? How would you encourage the clergy to come to you?
So I'm going to stand up because I do better walking around. So I'm going to answer the second part of this first. How would you encourage the clergy to come to you? I wouldn't. I would actually go to the clergy. Because the clergy are busy enough as it is. Trust me, we have more than enough to do as clergy. And so having the bishop be able to come to you, to me has been really helpful. My husband and I got married last June, and one of the really important things for us was that the bishop came and did our wedding. Not only did our wedding, but stayed for our reception. So it took an entire half day, cleared his schedule, to come to be with us and our family. And so that meant the world to my husband and I, but it meant the world to me as a clergy person that the bishop took time out to be there. The other part that our bishop in Michigan does that I think is absolutely amazing is that he makes a point of showing up to baptize any clergy kids, or to be there for their confirmations and stuff like that. And so that's something that I could see that I would love to do, to be able to be engaged in the life of the clergy, because if you have inspired, engaged clergy, it means that you have inspired, engaged congregations. And the chief pastor part, I tend to be a pastor at heart, and so to be able to pastor to or to be with clergy during those difficult times sometimes, or the joyful times in their lives, for me is really important. Back in 2014, I ended up in ICU for about 11 days, and my bishop was out of the country, but he called and made sure that there was a clergy person that came to the hospital to be there with me. And then when I got out of the hospital, he was back in town, and he came and showed up to make sure that I was okay. And so for me, that was kind of my image of how the bishop is pastor and chief pastor to the clergy. Same thing for congregations, because if a congregation is in crisis, having the bishop show up and be present, even if the bishop has to say absolutely nothing, just showing up is half the battle. For me, when I was growing up, my grandmother always said that there are 3 things that you can do to be successful: get up, dress up, and show up. I've gotten up, I've dressed up, and I'll show up. Because to me, that's half the battle. Jesus didn't just talk to people about how things could be. He showed up for them. Bartimaeus asked to be healed, and Jesus healed him. Jesus showed up when people needed him the most. And for me, I think that that's the role of the bishop, to show up when you are needed most.
Thank you.
This actually is water. My allergies have started, so.
What do you think of the current strategic plan for the diocese? How would you see yourself leading the collaborative effort to continue to renew this plan, and do you have a vision for where God might be calling ECR next?
Okay. Well, again, I think I'm going to answer the second part of the question first. Do I have a vision for where God might be calling ECR next? No, I do not. Why I say that is because I don't know your stories. I don't know all of who you are, and I haven't built that relationship to be able to say what your vision should be. I think part of being called would be to be open and to listen to what you have to say, the things that you have to do. Part of my work as a liturgical consultant, there are 2 questions that I always ask. The first one is a really easy one, and that first question is, what do you want more of? What is life-giving? Where do you see Jesus in this? And most congregations can really answer that question quite easily. The second question is often the hardest one, because the second question I ask is, what must you let go of in order for God to grow something new here? And that's usually where the stumbling block comes, because we are generally not wanting to let go of anything. We want young families, but we want the kids to be quiet. Have you ever met a baby that does not cry? So, that's a big part of it. We have to, being able to be open to hear what are some of the things and places that need to die in order for something new to happen. Because we as a church, we talk a lot about resurrection, don't we? But we don't talk about letting things die. And Jesus is always talking about, unless a grain of seed falls to the ground and dies, it does not become a plant. It does not put forth fruit. And so sometimes I think as a church, we need to be able to let some things die so that something new can grow in its place. In my parish, one of the things that we had to let die were committees. If you want an idea to die a quick death, give it to a committee. And so we got rid of committees and we moved towards having teams. What a team is, it has a beginning time, a set goal, a budget, and an end time. And when you are done, you are done. We have a stewardship team, and the goal of the stewardship team is raise this much money, you have this as a budget, and here's how many times you need to meet or whatever. And when you are done, you never have to see stewardship ever again if you don't want to. And so for me, that's really important because it means that we get to work together. I mean, Jesus, when he sent the disciples out, he didn't send them out one by one. He sent them out two by two. And one of the things that's exciting for me is that you have two canons to the ordinary that work collaboratively with Bishop Mary, and that you're able to hear the stories of each other from the bishop and from the bishop's office and the bishop's staff. Because to me, I see the bishop as having that panoramic view, but also being able to plug into each congregation where they are. So I think for me, that's where it would be, that we would craft the vision together.
Thank you. Jail ministry and re-entry into society is an important ministry, not only in ECR, but also in the Episcopal Church. What does all are welcome mean to you with regard to the incarcerated and those in re-entry from jail or prison? Does your answer change if they are a sexual offender or if their crime was violent?
So we had this exact same thing happen in my parish. One of the things that happened is that we had a registered sex offender come to the parish wanting to become a member. And so we had to ask ourselves some really tough questions. What does this mean? We have kids running around and all that stuff. And so as the vestry leadership, we got together and we decided that the way that we had to deal with this is that we had to change our policies around the care of children and whatnot. And so what it meant was that it came at a time when we were rebuilding our building. And so one of the things that came out of that is that every door in my parish is glass, so that you can walk by and see what's happening regardless of where you are, regardless of who's inside or outside. It meant that we also had to struggle with the privacy of that individual and the care of our children. And so we came up with a policy that we would notify the parents of all the children in the parish rather than making like a parish-wide announcement. We did that in conjunction with consultation from the chancellor of the diocese. So we made sure that we were on legal ground there. But it really made us have to stop and think about what it means for all to be welcomed. I mean, I've never been to a congregation that doesn't have all are welcome as part of their bulletin or on the front of the building. And so I'm yet to see one that says, you're welcome only if. And so it means that we really have to think about what happens if someone comes into our community who is a registered sex offender. What happens if somebody committed a violent crime? Because we as a church, our thing is forgiveness and redemption. And we know that God is able to work through people who are flawed. I mean, I always use the image of Moses. Moses was a murderer. He killed an Egyptian in cold blood. But God was able to still use Moses to accomplish amazing things for the people of Israel. And so for us, as a church, if we're going to start talking about all are welcomed, it really means that we have to think about and put policies and stuff in place to make sure that all are welcomed really does mean all are welcome, and how we're going to live that out. I mean, Jesus hung out with the lowest of the low and the folks who were on the margins, the people that nobody wanted to hang out with. And so if we're going to be that welcoming church, it means that we have to act a lot like Jesus.
Thank you. What would you do to increase understanding of the call to ordination, and that is both priestly and diaconal, and to help local congregations discern vocations among them? Should there be an age limit in place regarding ordination to the priesthood or the vocational diaconate?
Well, again, I'm going to answer the second part first. I was ordained in the Diocese of Ohio. At the time of my ordination, I was the first person in 28 years to go from college to seminary. Let's think about that. But I was also the person that they had to have a convention for because I was too young to be ordained to the priesthood because their canons were outdated weren't in line with the national canons. So yes, I am all for ordaining young people. I think one of the places where we can do work in the church is to equip clergy and lay leaders to be able to recognize vocations. Were it not for some very dedicated women, especially in the small parish not too far from the university that I went to school at, who saw in me something that I was not able to see myself. I mean, when I got there, they made me an acolyte, then I was a chalice bearer, then I was a Eucharistic visitor, and by the time I was 19, I was a parish administrator. And then they started saying to me, well, you know, we think you might be called to being a priest. And I went, no. You can see who won. But they were able to recognize in me something that I was not able to recognize at the time. I also think that we need to start having our young people see ordination, whether it's to the diaconate or to the priesthood, as a viable vocation. What I mean by that is we will encourage kids to go be a doctor or be a lawyer or, I guess in this area, an engineer of some kind. But we don't talk a lot about, have you considered being a priest? It is a life-giving opportunity. Have you thought about being a deacon? You can work out in the corporate world and bring the outside into the church. So I really do think that we do have to do a much better job of seeing priesthood and diaconate as a viable ministry, along with laity being a viable ministry. Because we don't talk about the laity as a vocation. And it really is. It's a vocation to be called to the altar guild. It's a vocation to be called the treasurer. God bless you for that, but that's a really special vocation. But I do think that part of it is that to train clergy and laity to be able to see God working in someone and to point that as an avenue for them as they go forward in their faith.
Thank you. What are your plans for effectively communicating with the diocese should you be elected? How will we come to know you? What mechanisms would you use for allowing your voice to be heard around the diocese?
Thank you. Well, one of the things that we've done at my parish is we have embraced technology in a good way. So at the beginning of our worship services, the person who welcomes you encourages you to take out your phone and check in. Usually most people go into church and say, well, turn off your phone, but we encourage people to turn them on and check in so that people know that you are in church, don't call you. It works. So, I mean, we have amazing technology that can connect us. I mean, we as a church, we were the original social network, weren't we? And so why should we push against technology that can actually help us be better at who we are? So one of the things that I would love to do, in addition to our print material, would be perhaps to do a video message for Christmas or Easter or the beginning of Lent for the seasons. Or, I mean, there are enough congregations here that the bishop could do a stewardship pitch for the congregations that's recorded and put on their website or something like that. So for me, I really see technology as being a tool that we can use. I am a gadget person. Ask my husband. We have way too many things in our house. But I really do see using that technology. For instance, I could see, on a visitation, interviewing the rector, interviewing some of the ministry people, that it could be put on the diocesan Facebook page, it could be put on the YouTube channel, that it could be put up so that the rest of the diocese can see, well, here's what's going on in San Luis Obispo. Here's what's going on in Palo Alto. Here's a ministry that you should know about. Because again, sometimes just seeing the work that other congregations are doing may inspire you to do something similar or to do something different. And by way of getting to know me, I like to cook and I like to eat. And I would love to eat my way from San Luis Obispo all the way up to Palo Alto. I think we're kind of doing that with the Walkabouts, but when I first got called to be the rector of St. Paul's, one of the things that we did is I did rector dinners. So people signed up, we went and had dinner, I got to know a little bit of the people, and we did it again over and over until I got to meet the entire congregation. I could see doing something like that where I call to be your bishop. Doing a bishop listening session where we go from one end of the diocese to the other and just listen and hear stories, and that you get to know me and that I get to know you a little bit better. Because for better or for worse, that's what Jesus did. He ran around Galilee, eating and getting to know people. And so for me, it's like if we're not able to at least try to follow Jesus, well, we're doing this in vain. And so for me, I would love that opportunity to kind of, get to know all of the different places in the diocese and to get to know all the different congregations. I mean, one of the things that I would love to do, at least in the first year if I were called, would be to go visit every single congregation if possible. So.
Thank you. And for the last of our planned questions, how would you engage, inspire, and lead the laity in ECR towards living more fully into the Baptismal Covenant?
Thank you. So how many of you have heard the phrase empowered laity? Everybody. What does that mean? How do we do it? No hands. Well, I mean, part of it for me is we always talk about empowering the laity, but we never really do, as the church as a whole, we never really do much to figure out what that means. And so I always wondered, why is it that, people are sent off as clergy to be trained, and they come back with one of these funny things, and, there's a whole process for that. Well, where's the process for making lay leaders? Why is there not a vocation school for the laity? And so when I served as the chair of vital congregations in the Diocese of Michigan, one of the things that we did is we came up with Vestry University. What Vestry University was, it happened in February, and it was a gathering or multiple gatherings, but it was gatherings of newly elected vestries and old vestries, and with the diocesan staff and the bishop and everybody else, and it was a full day of learning and training for vestry members. And it made the world of difference, because what happened was senior wardens knew what the senior warden was supposed to do. Junior wardens knew what they were supposed to do. Vestry members knew what their responsibility was because they all got the same training. And what we found that happened was that the tensions between rectors and vestries went down because people knew what they were supposed to be doing. And so one of the things that I could imagine happening would be to doing a vocational leadership or vocational training for folks to be able to come and say, hey, this is what I'm called to be as a lay person. The other thing is I think we need to change our language. Being called to something is a vocation. The altar guild is a vocation. It takes a special vocation to be able to do that. All the stuff that we see in church is a vocation. And I mean, there's a joke in my parish that I voluntold everybody what to do. And what I mean by that is I will come up to someone and say, well, you look like you should be in the choir. I could hear you singing when I'm processing by. Oh, no, I've never sung. Come on, just try the choir for 6 months. I had a lady in my parish who she served on stewardship forever. And we had a conversation. I found out she was a professional baker. And I'm like, so why are you not on the altar guild helping to make bread? Nobody ever asked me. Would you like to go make the bread for the altar guild? And I mean, she makes amazing gluten-free bread for everybody, where we have kids that will come back for second Jesus helpings. But part of it was being able to see that this was her vocation and that it really was a vocation. So I really do think that we have to do a much better job of empowering the laity and having them see what they do is a vocation and that they can glorify God and serve Jesus by doing just that.
Thank you very much. So that is the end of our planned questions, and we have 5 minutes left. So I think we have time for one question from the audience. Who has a question that they would like to ask? Yes?
Can you share your thoughts about vocational deacons?
Yes. I love them. a deacon in every church. I'm blessed that I have in my parish that we have a vocational deacon. And I really do wish that every congregation could have a deacon. Here's why. For me, the role of the deacon is to have 1 foot inside the church and 1 foot outside the church. And to always be pointing us to what's happening outside. We have a deacon at my parish where she kicks our spiritual butts when we don't do something. Because she will say, hey, there are people who are homeless outside that we need to do something for. And so she kind of keeps reminding us of the stuff that we need to do. And for me, one of the most important roles of the deacon is at the end of the service, where the deacon says, go. I wish they would say something along the lines of, you can't stay here, but you got to get out. Or go out into the world and do something would be a much better dismissal on some Sundays. But to be able to, for the deacon to tell us, go out into the world to love and serve the Lord, is an invitation to go out and actually follow Jesus. I mean, we can talk a lot and sing a lot inside the beautiful spaces, but unless we're out there and engaging and letting people know of this good news about Jesus who changed our lives, what we sing and do is almost meaningless if we're not able to share it out there. So a deacon being able to tell us, here's where the needs are, go out into the world and do it.
Thank you very much.